Is it already the time? That's the compliment. That means that you organize the lesson very well. If you're super motivated and you have very strong power of will, you have to go against your subconscious. And then the guy was standing on this one leg thing, juggling and keeping the sword. People got bored because they actually kind of figure out what this spy is exactly. What does she want them to do? They were like 1, 3, 5, 7, and then one person is like 8. The level of feedback, the amount of feedback has to be corresponding with the difficulty level. I played Cascara and asked her to do the same task, and I could clearly see that it's like she didn't overthink anything. And at some point, she started to invent amazing steps out of those 3 basic figures. Hello everyone, my name is Svetlana Rey. I'm a salsa mentor, dancer, psychologist, and also dance teacher's coach. I've been teaching salsa and dancing for more than 15 years, and I've decided to create this podcast for salsa nerds like me, for people who want to get as soon as possible to the top social dancers list, who want to enjoy the trainings, and who want to get the best from what salsa offers to us. And in this podcast, you will have a lot of tips from my psychological background, psychological knowledge, and also from all the years of teaching experience that I had. Today, we're going to talk about the flow topic, which was a game changer, absolute game changer a few years ago. I already used to have my teacher's training, but when I discovered the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, it was like a blast. It changed everything, and it gave me a better understanding of actually what's going on at teachers' classes and how can we make our trainings more pleasurable and how can we achieve our results faster. So today I'm gonna share all the tips about the flow state. Get your popcorn and let's go. The main insight that I got in the last weeks came to me when I read the book of James Clear, Atomic Habits. The insight was that we actually training every day. So whatever we do, we're training, and we constantly get better in what do we train. Whether it is eating sweets or lying on the couch or maybe running every morning or training salsa or reading, we always get better. I noticed it very fast when I spent 2.5 weeks in Italy training with Sea Crew guys. And I had a very nice time of my life. I rented an Airbnb, and in the first morning, I went to the cafe close to the seashore. And this cafe had very tiny little small desserts. And I was like, okay, I try one. And then the next day I came back and I was like, okay, I can take this one and another one. And then I think I ended up trying 4, and it was a little already too much. So that was the very obvious example of how I got better in eating sweets. So whatever we do, we're getting better. And our main task is to actually fix the idea of repetition. And this is what James Clear says in his book. He says, when you try to establish the new habit, the most important thing is that you only do this for 2 minutes every day. Only for 2 minutes. If you go running, you run only 2 minutes and then great, you achieve the goal. Because if for the first time, the goal is not to run like a bull. The goal is to actually fix the pattern in our brain of repeating the same movement or repeating the same procedure or the same ritual or whatever it is. And actually, I started to run as well in Italy, and I had good and bad example, let's say. So every morning I wake up and run, and I found myself putting pressure because I was like, you are too weak, you could run more, and all those thoughts which are probably familiar to you. But then I was like, James Clear said, it has to be only 2 minutes, I do 2 minutes, and I'm done. Great job, I did it. And it actually helped me a lot to maintain the habit, and I'm still doing it nowadays. I mean, it's been a couple of months, but still, it's working. I can say definitely it's working because it releases the pressure that we normally put on ourselves. When we start taking something, we imagine ourselves being already very good, or at least pretending to be very good. But we have to focus in the very beginning on the fact that we just have to keep repeating, and not expecting very big results. Because the main idea is to just establish the habit. And there are 2 factors to make the repetition more probable for us. This is the simplicity and the joy. So the habit for us has to be simple, and the habit has to bring us joy. And here we're coming directly to the flow topic, because Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he's an American psychologist, with Hungarian origin, and he was investigating these people who were doing some nice stuff, like, for example, sportsmen or people of art or musicians or dancers, like all those people who are doing like good, nice things, which supposed to feel nice. And he found out that these people actually have the same brain activity. It feels like they're all in the same state, even though they are doing absolutely different things. And this is how he came up with the flow concept. So he said that in everyday life, when we do nothing, our brain activity is chaotic. So he calls it entropy. We have entropy. And the bad thing about entropy is that it always gets worse. So for example, if you go out in the morning and you're like thinking about, wow, what a nice sunny day, the sun is shining, and then you start thinking, oh, I wish I had more sun in my life, maybe I should go to vacation, and then you think like, oh, I can't go to vacation because I have a tough job, and oh, I don't like my job, oh, I don't like my life. It's like it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And this is the idea of entropy. But when we get into the flow state, our brain activity structures, and actually we lose ourselves kinda for this time, but when we finish, we feel ourselves even better. That's why the key point to continue training is to bring yourself always in this flow state. Flow state has 4 features. First is, as already said, we lose our self-conscious. Imagine yourself, I don't know, doing windsurfing, for example. You have so many things. You have the board, you have the sail, you have the wind, you have the sea, and you have to manage all those things. And of course, you don't have any time nor working memory to think about who you are. Like, I am now doing windsurfing. You just absolutely focused on the task. Characteristic number 2 is that you feel very well the control over your actions. Imagine you playing, or recall yourself playing Super Mario. I think everybody played Super Mario when we were kids. So you have to make sure that like Super Mario runs, and then when you press a button, Super Mario jumps. And then when you press the button in the wrong time, Super Mario falls in a hole or is being eaten by a dragon or something else. So you feel very well that you control his movements, that you control when exactly to press the button. Characteristic number 3, when you finish your activity, your me feeling gets a little stronger. Imagine yourself climbing a rock. And you climb. When you climb, you feel that you control the grip, you control the wind, you feel the wind at least, you don't control it. You control like where your body is and everything. So you don't have any time to think about anything else. But then when you finish and you're on top, you feel like, oh my God, I did a great job. I'm super proud of myself. So this is the idea. When you finish, because you were devoted by the task, you feel good about yourself. And the most obvious criteria is that you lose the sense of time. I mean, I don't think that you need any additional explanation about that. You all had this experience of an amazing salsa lesson when the time just flew. You didn't even notice that 1 hour just left like this. So that's the main idea. When you're in the flow, you don't notice how does the time fly. And this is a very great criteria for teachers. So if the students say, oh, the class, I just didn't notice, or is it already the time? That's a compliment. That means that you organized the lesson very well. And also is the criteria for you. If you missed the time, like if you didn't pay attention to the time, that means that you organized yourself very well and you were in a flow state. So inevitably, when you're in a flow state, you feel joy about the process that you're doing, actually. And after that, you want to come back to this state because you felt well. And that's the key point to continue your salsa training. So if for some reason your salsa trainings don't bring you joy, even if you're super motivated and you have very strong power of will, you have to go against your subconscious, against yourself, and it won't last very long. So the easiest way in this case is to organize your trainings in a way so that you feel joy, you're in a flow state. And for that, you need to fulfill 4 conditions. Condition number 1, you have to have the ability to concentrate. And before going to Colombia, I was like, when I taught teachers at the teacher's training, I was like, okay, guys, it's like you don't really need to explain that because we all have the classrooms and they're closed, nobody's interfering, and we can all concentrate. It's not a big deal. But then when I was in Colombia, I just started to laugh during the class because I visited a workshop, the masterclass of one teacher, and we had a room that had one glass wall facing the crossroad. And, in Colombia, at crossroads, they do some crazy things. Sometimes you have people washing your windows. Sometimes you have just acrobats or fortune tellers, everyone, they just try to earn money. He was given the routine and it was kind of pretty difficult. So I really had to focus to memorize the order of the moves. And then I just, with the corner of my eye, looked at the crossroad and there was a guy standing on a chair. So they have this chair with one leg. So there was the chair and then this one leg chair on this. And then the guy was standing on this one leg thing, juggling and keeping the sword in his teeth. And it was so funny because I got distracted right away because I was like, I couldn't imagine seeing anything like that. And the guy was just it was it's the most stupid thing, that you can imagine. But I got distracted so quickly because this guy just attracted all my attention. And then I started to laugh because I was like, yeah, okay, this is the moment when you get distracted during a class. After making sure that nobody or nothing will distract you, you have to make sure that you have a very clear goal, very specific goal. This is actually a thing I was already mentioning in all the previous podcasts, but this is a super important thing because if your goal is not clear, then your brain doesn't understand what to do. And for example, I was once at the class of the guy who taught spinning. The class was spinning technique. And because, I'm also specialized in spinning technique and salsa, I was curious. So I came maybe 10 minutes after the class began, and then teacher put them in columns and asked them to do just chain of spins from one wall to another. And they were just doing traveling turns, let's say. I can't call it spins. So they did traveling turns from one wall to another one and back. From one wall to another one and back. 10 minutes after the beginning. Clearly, he didn't explain them anything of what's happening because spinning has a lot of parts. You have to keep track on your axis. You have to spot. You have to slide. You have to keep track on your impulse, and do all those things at the same time. So it's a really complicated process. And he just said, "We spin," and they were spinning somehow, and it was so painful because they couldn't spin, of course. This is why they came for the class, and he just asked them to spin. I think it's very, very severe. I could see pain in their faces because they would struggle, they would fall, they would feel very dizzy, but they wouldn't know what to and how to correct it because the task wasn't clear. Let's say the task itself was clear. You spin till you die or till you reach the opposite wall, but within the technique, on the technique level, the task was not clear. And that's why it leads directly to frustration. So the task has to be super clear. You can have the feeling of control. Okay, I fall, but I know that I fell because I lifted my heel, or I know that I fell because I didn't spot correctly. So I have to do this and this and this. These are the clear instructions that have to accompany the clear task. Another example that I have about putting a clear task happened once when I was given teacher's training in Sochi. And there was one girl who made it actually not very well. I gave them the task. So we did an exercise about explanation, and I taught them actually how to explain every movement using different orders of the keys. So you have the keys of first order where you explain what part of your body, what it does, where does it go, on which count, and all of these basic things. So the task was to split your movement into these keys and explain it super, super precisely so that people understand. And she just came there and she started to do kind of like a song step song step thing. And she says, literally, okay, now we're doing pa, pa. And she was not doing the movement and just accompanied with one word. We're doing pa and pa. And of course, expecting other teachers to repeat after her. And I just gave her this time and I was observing. And of course, later on, she had a lot of troubles to correct them because the task was not clear. And also you could see that the people got bored because they actually kind of figure out what this pa is exactly. What does she want them to do? Yeah, in this pa. because you can see, but the technique and like some details are always different. The condition number 3, your task has to be in a boiling level. I call it boiling level. It's not a scientific term, but it represents the reality very well. Boiling level means that it's not easy so that you don't feel bored, but it's not too complicated so that you don't feel frustrated. Boiling level is when you're absolutely devoted by the task and you cannot concentrate on anything else. A perfect example was when I did, I don't remember, it was like many years ago, on my regular salsa class or musicality class, I did something that was connected to rhythm. And I remember I asked my students to do the just step tap from one side to another, and then do the claps. I think they had to clap on upbeat, like 2, 4, 6, 8, but they had to pronounce 1, 3, 5, 7. So it was like kind of complicated task. They had to step, they had to clap, and they had to pronounce numbers, but it was all mixed. So they were absolutely boiling. And I could feel this energy and tension in the class, and they were like counting as a choir, 1, 3, 5, 7. But I could feel that they're like super tense and overwhelmed and absolutely concentrated. And then they were like 1, 3, 5, 7, and then one person is like 8. And then I could clearly see that like the whole group just fell apart because they couldn't continue walking, because it was like to already like just ruined them. This 8 just ruined everything. So that was exactly the example of the boiling level. It's up to you to find the boiling level for yourself. The example that I meet the most often happens in the musicality, whatever games or marathons that I do, when the music or the snippet has a lot of instruments and the task is only to follow one. So many people feel overwhelmed hearing all those instruments, and they cannot follow actually just one instrument which they have to follow, and they feel frustrated. But that means the task is over the boiling level. So what I recommend to do, of course, just to mute as many instruments as you have to mute in order to succeed with the task, right? So that it's not very boring, but at the same time, it challenges you. So that's the boiling level. And what I want you to keep in mind about that is that it's up to you to control the difficulty of every task. Because teachers, of course, great teachers will adjust to the group, but maybe you are faster than the group, or maybe you are slower than the group. And there, in both cases, there is nothing wrong with you. You just have to make sure that you adjust the difficulty of your task for yourself. The condition number 4 is the feedback. So in order to keep yourself in a flow state, you always have to receive the feedback. And here we can talk in two perspectives. First is the feedback of your teacher at the lesson. So now I address mostly the teachers. There are some teachers that tend to give the task, but don't accompany with any feedback. So for example, they say, okay, we learned the routine, and now we dance it with music. And then, of course, the teacher dances one or a couple of times with the group, and then he leaves the group, and the group dances by itself. And you can even feel it, this moment when the group danced the routine for one time, and they finished, you can see these puppy eyes, they start looking at the teacher. It's like, did we do it well? Did we do it well? And if in this moment, they eager for feedback. And if the teacher says, yes, that was good, then you can feel this energy boost, that happens in the whole group, because they did their best, they succeeded, and then the teachers confirmed with the feedback, yes, you succeeded, great, and then you have this energy level increasing because of that. At the same time, if you don't get any feedback, you can see that, first of all, the people start get anxious, like, oh, I'm doing it, I'm repeating it for so many times, but I don't get any feedback, I don't understand, and they start to feel anxious or confused, and at the end, bored, of course. So giving feedback is a super important thing. As a teacher, you have to realize that it's an instrument that if you use it well, you can boost the energy level of your group with actually doing nothing. You don't even have to dance. You just have to say yes, or you just have to say, okay, guys, that was great. Let us do it again with more energy, or let us do it more sexy, or any kind of feedback, or guys, it was so. Let us do it again. Any kind of feedback works. I mean, of course, it has to be real. Or if you don't use it well, for example, if you don't give any feedback, then your students really get either angry or bored, depending on the difficulty level of the task. When you work by yourself, there can be two things. The most difficult one is when you have like you give feedback for yourself just because you know the task. For example, when my students do the musicality marathon or the Salsa Instincts game, they have some tasks where they have to hit the sounds of some instrument with the steps, with specific steps. So for example, you have cascara, ta-tak, tak, ta-tak, 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 tak, and your main task is to do the moves with the specific footworks, hitting the sounds. And because you know that your task is clear for you, you can sometimes, hopefully, most of the people, they're able to correct. Yeah, so when they miss it, they're like, oh, I missed it. And you can even see when they send me the videos, I can clearly see that whether they realize that they made a mistake or not. But this is actually a pretty demanding way, even though, in my opinion, it's kind of the only way to learn a lot of things. Because you have to clearly understand the instructions. What do you have to do? And you have to be very attentive, because I also met a lot of people who are clearly, like, for example, I say, guys, in this movement, on the count number 3, your right knee has to be straight. And then they clearly do it with the bent knee on 3, and they don't even notice because, I don't know, they don't pay attention. So this is like a demanding way, but it has to be like, you have to, if you find yourself being a little bit not so much attentive about those things, work on that, because it will give you a lot in your learning. It will make your learning a lot faster. Sometimes very nice teachers, they create those kind of amazing tasks that are kind of self-giving feedback tasks. For example, probably a lot of you heard this, not as the bow tie, I think it's a tie, which you hang on a neck. So a teacher asks them to hold the tie and to make sure that it actually hangs in order to verify the correct body position. Because when you dance, your upper body has to go a little bit forward. But if you have the break in your lower back, then your belly goes forward and your tie will be just lying on your body. But if you have the correct position, your tie is actually hanging. So this is a perfect self-giving feedback exercise, because people clearly see whether they do it right or wrong. I remember I did once the similar task with the glasses of water. There was the coordination task. So I gave my students, each of them, 2 glasses full of water, and I asked them to do the normal Latin body movement isolations, when the shoulders go back and forth and the arm have to balance the movement, making sure that they don't lose any drop of water, because you have to isolate the movement. And if you tense your chest muscles in this exercise, then the water pours on the floor. But if you execute the movement with your back muscles, then you are able to isolate the arms. So that was the movement which I want my students to get. So I organized this exercise in this way. It was super flow generating, let's say, because everybody was super engaged. They tried they try like this and like that, and they realized, okay, like this, it's wrong because the water goes down, like this is correct. So this is, the floor was absolutely wet afterwards, but we achieved the goal. So there was like the self-giving feedback exercise. Also, as a dance teacher, you have to understand that the amount of feedback has to be corresponding with the difficulty level. So if the difficulty of the task is very low, but the feedback level is very high, for example, you go to intermediate class and you ask them to do Suzuki, and then you're like, come on, guys, we can do this, or like, come on, I don't know, try to correct this, try to correct that. People will be most likely feeling frustrated because they're like, I can already do that. Why do you say that? Like, we don't need it, At the same time, if the difficulty level is super high, but the amount of feedback is super low, then they're going to get angry. I found myself very often being angry at any kind of sports, like fitness classes or yoga, when you're like overloaded, you're standing in this like dog, whatever, face down position, your arms are shaking because you're already super tired. And your teachers are saying, you slowly lift the right leg up, and you lift it, and teacher says nothing, and you're already like ready to fall and to die, but you don't know when it will be over. So it's like really, really annoying. So there are a lot of ways to give feedback. It can be the timing, for example, when you count is a feedback, because people can understand whether they are following the timing or not. When you just praise them is a feedback. When you correct them is a feedback. When you support them, motivate them, like, come on a little, it's a feedback too. So there are different ways to give feedback, and talented teachers, they naturally feel it. But in general, if you want to get it on a conscious way, try to experiment with the group, with the difficulty of the task, and with the amount of feedback that you give. You will see that actually directly influences the amount of energy that your group generates. Another interesting thing about the flow state is that it's very different when you begin to do something and when you're already experienced. So the quality of the flow is different. For example, imagine, just recall yourself being at the first salsa class when you're just beginning the first basic and you are feeling absolutely overwhelmed by the counts, by the pause in between, by some steps, some rules. You cannot lift your heel, you cannot put your heel down or anything. You're in the flow because you have a clear task. You have, hopefully, and then you're devoted by the task, you're concentrated, you're clearly in the flow. But this level of the flow is not comparable with the level of the flow, for example, which I had when I had a battle with Nicola De Angelis. When I was in Italy, I was taking classes with Sikru, as I already said, and when I took a class with Nicola, I just asked him to battle with me. And it was I was absolutely in a flow state, even though I was all shaking. Again, there were all conditions were there, but the difficulty of the task was so high. So it's you know the song, you have to hit all the notes, and you have to make sure that your movements look nice, and you have to interact with Nicola and enjoy the process. There are lots of things, and I could manage as I could them all. Of course, this flow level is absolutely different. So good news is that the more you improve, the better quality of your flow state you will get. And of course, you will get even more joy from it. Imagine, just recall yourself having the first amazing dance with a kind of advanced dancer as a follow, for example, when you got it. So before you were just screwing up some moves because you wouldn't follow, but there was one dance when you just follow everything. And you absolutely were in a flow. And this level of happiness is absolutely uncomparable, right? With the level of happiness when you just succeed on your basic salsa step. Just keep it in mind. How to use this all for your trainings. First of all, you have to monitor your emotions, because your emotions are very clear indicators if something is wrong. So if you feel bored, of course, that could mean that your teacher is not very good and blah, blah, and anything. But I had a story recently when one person was about to book a private with me in Prague. And she said, I'm afraid, because it was her first private with me. She was like, I'm afraid. I was like, what are you afraid of? She said, I'm afraid that you ask me to do something which I won't succeed to make. And I was like, that means that I'm a bad teacher, because a good teacher would always give the task again on a boiling level so that person can do this and have this successful feeling afterwards. That means that difficulty of the task is low, or that the task is not clear. It can be both. So if you feel that you're bored because the difficulty of the task is low, then complicate it. Keep in mind that this difficulty boiling level, it's absolutely your responsibility. So even if you, for example, you assist your teacher at the beginner's class and he's showing basic figures, basic steps, Suzy cues and mambo, you already know those steps, but try to copy your teacher, try to copy the basic movement, try to copy the coordination, try to copy the grooving, try to copy the manner, the style of your teacher. Give yourself additional tasks in order to make your task a little bit more exciting. Or if the task wasn't clear and that's why you feel bored, you can either ask your teacher to clarify what exactly do you have to do, or you can just clarify it for yourself. However, the teacher tells you, you just dance the whole song, which is not very clear. You can say, okay, I dance only with the right hand. And this is how you get into the flow state. Another example of adjustment of the difficulty level I just got recently when I was in Moscow. There was one girl who asked me for the private, and she said, the request was the following. She said, when I do just improvisation, I overthink. I tend to overthink. I tend to control everything, and I cannot come up with any creative moves. So she was pretty unsatisfied with that. And I assumed that if you overthink, it means that your brain is not busy enough with more complicated things. So I gave her the task. I say, okay, we have only 3 moves. You have Suzy Q, you have Mambo, and you have, I don't remember, let's call it Grapevine. And then you have to combine those 3 moves and hit the clave. So what I did, I played the clave, only the clave pattern. She was already pretty advanced, let's say, student. And I played fast clave, and I asked her to combine those movements, hitting the clave beats. And I gave her to dance like a couple of minutes, and then I asked, how did it feel? And she was like, yeah, it felt good, but I still caught myself overthinking things. Then I said, okay. And I played cascara, which has like way more notes, and it was still way fast. So I played cascara and asked her to do the same task. And I could clearly see that it's like she didn't overthink anything. And at some point, she started to invent amazing steps out of those 3 basic figures, just because he got into the flow and he got devoted by the task. I got her on this boiling level. And then after this try, I asked her, like, how did it feel? And she was like, wow, it works, it's a miracle, it works. But it wasn't a miracle, it was just psychology. So if something is not working, for example, if you feel that you are a bad dancer, these are emotions, try to indicate, okay, I feel bad, that means that the task probably is too complicated for me, right? So you just simplify it, because it's not your fault. I can get a task that is too complicated for me, and that doesn't mean that I'm a bad dancer, right? So try to look on it from a different perspective. You just have to bring yourself to this flow condition, and that's the main goal. Because if you're in the flow, you will be training again and again and again. And with every training, you will inevitably get better and better and better. And how to get to this flow condition, you just have to, I was explaining you in the last half an hour. So just try to catch the main criteria, try to indicate your emotions, and adjust always the feedback or the level of the task to your own level. So guys, I hope that this flow concept will help you to maintain your training consistent and also to make it more joyful, because I know, and my students keep telling me, a lot of horrible examples of teachers who just simply can tell you, oh, you do it wrongly, your movement is horrible, and leave. And of course, if you have these stressful conditions when you train salsa, like, you either have to be like a super powerful, strong person just to keep training, keep training in spite of that, or it's better just to realize what's going on and try to adjust your training in the way so that it brings you in a flow state, and you don't care about your teacher. If your teacher gives you this this feedback, you just adjust the task for yourself and get what you want. And then you want to come back to the trainings, because as I already said in the beginning, of course, what exactly do you do and what exactly do you train? All the techniques that you train, they matter. Of course, you have to train with a good teacher doing the correct movements. But what is more important is just to keep training. And for that, you just to make sure that you have simple in the meaning of clear task. You have to understand, okay, the task is simple, the task is clear. I know what I want to do. And then you have to get yourself in a flow state so that you feel joy afterwards. You feel that you become better. You have the achievements that you can praise yourself for. And the whole salsa process is just more joyful and brings you more happiness. That's how you get back to training, and that's how you get to the top social dancers list. So guys, I hope that this podcast episode was helpful for you. Please feel free to write your opinions in the comments. If you have any questions, I also very open to that, because I love questions. And also feel free to share your insights and thoughts on Instagram and tag me in your stories. And have fun training. Bye.